My name is Sienna Fry, and I'm 29 years old. When my father passed away 3 years ago, he left me something everyone in my family laughed about at the funeral: a crumbling stone farmhouse 2 hours outside the city, sitting on 11 acres of neglected land that hadn't been touched in over a decade. My younger brother Julian got the real inheritance, a fully furnished luxury apartment in Manhattan, complete with a parking garage and a view of the river. My mother made sure everyone at the reading of the will understood the difference. She held Julian's hand the entire time and barely looked at me. "Your father always said Julian was the one who'd go places," she told me afterward, not even bothering to soften it. "The house is just something for you to have. It's not much, but it's yours." I remember standing in that lawyer's office holding a folder with property deeds to a house with a collapsed roof section and mold creeping up the kitchen walls, while my brother held keys to a $2 million condo he hadn't lifted a finger to earn. I didn't cry in front of them. I saved that for the drive home alone, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. For years, my mother had a favorite line she used whenever Julian and I were compared. "He has vision. You just work hard." She said it like working hard was something lesser, something for people who couldn't dream bigger. I heard it so many times growing up that I started to believe it myself. But something about standing in that ruined house alone with dust falling from the ceiling beams lit something in me I didn't know was still there. I didn't sell it. I didn't walk away. Instead, I drained almost every cent of my savings, took out a loan I could barely qualify for, and started rebuilding it board by board, room by room. The first winter, I slept in a sleeping bag because there was no working heat. I learned how to patch a roof from YouTube videos at 11 hours at night after 12-hour shifts at my job. I negotiated with contractors who assumed I didn't know what I was talking about because I was a woman standing alone on a construction site with a hard hat that didn't fit right. There were nights I sat in my car in the driveway and questioned whether I was insane for pouring everything I had into a place my own family saw as worthless. But slowly the walls went up straight. The roof stopped leaking. The old barn became a bright, airy guest house. I turned the surrounding acres into a working lavender farm, something I'd read about in a magazine years earlier and never forgotten. By the second year, tourists were driving out from the city just to walk through the fields and buy dried bundles from the little stand I built by the gate. By the third year, I had a waiting list for weekend stays in the guest house, a small staff of 4, and a business that was, for the first time in my life, entirely mine. When my mother finally came to see it, I hadn't invited her. She'd heard about it from a cousin who'd stayed there for a weekend getaway. She stood in the doorway of the main house with her mouth slightly open, taking in the restored wooden beams, the fresh paint, the field stretching out gold and purple in the afternoon light. I watched something shift behind her eyes, something that looked less like pride and more like calculation. She didn't say congratulations. She didn't ask how I'd done it. Instead, she walked through the property in silence, running her fingers along the countertops I'd installed myself. And then she turned to me with an expression I recognized instantly, because I'd seen it my whole childhood whenever Julian wanted something. "You have 72 hours to give this place back to us," she said, her voice flat, like she was reading off a grocery list instead of dismantling 3 years of my life. "Julian's apartment isn't working out for him anymore. He needs something stable. Your father would have wanted the land to go to him eventually anyway. You've done a nice job fixing it up, but it was never really supposed to be yours long term." I stood there in my own kitchen, in the home I had bled and sacrificed and nearly broken myself to save, and I said nothing. Not because I didn't have words, because I already knew what was coming next, and I wanted to see exactly how far they were willing to go. 2 days later, I heard the gravel crunch under tires in the driveway, and I looked out the window to see Julian's pickup truck pulling in, packed with boxes, like he was already moving in. He stepped out smiling, confident, entitled, walking toward the house like he already owned it. Then he looked up. He saw the finished exterior, the flourishing fields, the guests sitting on the porch with glasses of iced tea, the sign out front with a business name that had grown a small but loyal following online. His face went dark, and for the first time in his life, I watched my brother realize he had underestimated me completely. Julian stood frozen at the edge of the driveway, one hand still on the truck door, staring at everything he had never expected to see. He'd pictured a rundown farmhouse he could take over and flip, something to bail him out after months of missed rent payments on that Manhattan apartment. He'd already burned through most of his savings trying to maintain. Instead, he was looking at a thriving business with paying guests, a farm stand doing steady weekend traffic, and a woman standing on the porch who no longer looked like the sister he remembered folding into herself at family dinners. "Sienna," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "This is wow. Mom said this place was falling apart." "It was," I said calmly, walking down the porch steps to meet him halfway. 3 years ago, I take it you're here to collect on Mom's 72-hour deadline." He shifted his weight, glancing at the guests on the porch, at the neat rows of lavender swaying in the breeze, at the guest house with its window boxes and fresh paint. I could see him doing math in his head, trying to figure out how a project he dismissed as a joke had turned into something that clearly generated real income. "Look, it doesn't have to be complicated," he said, softening his tone the way he always did when he wanted something. "You could stay and help run it. I just need my name on the deed." Mom's right. Dad probably would have wanted the land to go to me eventually. You know how he was about legacy, keeping things in the family line. "I am the family line, Julian," I said. "I'm the one who saved this place. You got a $2 million apartment the day Dad died. I got a house with a hole in the roof and mold in the walls. Nobody handed me a 5-year plan. I built one." He didn't have a response for that, not a real one, so he tried a different angle, the one that had always worked when we were kids. "Mom's going to be really disappointed if you fight this," he said. "She already told everyone at Aunt Carol's dinner that the property was coming back to the family properly. You'd be embarrassing her." I almost laughed. "The property already is with the family, Julian. I'm still your sister. I'm still her daughter. The only thing that's changed is that I stopped waiting for either of you to notice that." That's when my mother's car pulled up behind his truck, gravel crunching under the tires, and she stepped out already talking before her door was even shut. "Sienna, be reasonable. Julian needs stability. You clearly landed on your feet here. You can find something else." I let her finish. I learned patience the hard way, the same way I learned how to reframe a doorway and patch a roof and price lavender bundles for a farmer's market. Then I pulled out my phone and opened a folder I'd been keeping for exactly this moment. "Before either of you say anything else, I want you to see something," I said, turning the screen toward them. It was the updated property appraisal along with the business registration, the guest house booking calendar, filled through the next 4 months, and a letter from a regional tourism board that had reached out about featuring the farm in a magazine spread. "This isn't a house anymore. It's a business, and it's registered solely in my name, built entirely with my own money, my own loans, and 3 years of my own labor. There's no clause in Dad's will that lets either of you reclaim it, because I already had a lawyer review that possibility the day Mom first mentioned it to me over the phone last month." My mother's face went pale. She hadn't expected me to know she'd already been planning this before Julian even showed up. "You've been discussing this behind my back," I continued. "Deciding how to redistribute something I built from nothing while I was out here working 16-hour days to make sure this land didn't fall apart like everyone assumed it would. I'm not angry that you doubted me. I'm angry that you never once asked how I was doing it. You just assumed I'd fail, and when I didn't, your plan was to take it instead of admit you were wrong." Julian looked at the ground, quiet for the first time since he'd arrived. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it again, the 72-hour deadline she'd delivered so confidently, now sitting uselessly between us. "You can visit," I told them both, my voice steady, no longer shaking the way it used to whenever she raised her voice at me. "You can even stay in the guest house sometime if you book it like anyone else. But this land isn't up for negotiation, and it never will be again. I watched Julian climb back into his truck a few minutes later, the boxes still packed in the bed, no house waiting for him at the end of that drive. My mother lingered a moment longer, searching my face for the girl who used to apologize just to keep the peace. She didn't find her. If this story hit home for you, if you've ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to believe in you the most, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications.